Good evening, everyone. Namaste. A warm welcome to all of you joining us from across the country and beyond. On behalf of National Gallery of Modern Art Bengaluru, under the aegis of Ministry of Culture, Government of India, I am delighted to welcome you to the second session of our online art appreciation series. Our theme for today takes us into the layered and lyrical world of Rabindranath Tagore, a towering figure in Indian literature and thought, but also a deeply innovative visual artist whose paintings reflect mysticism, emotional intensity, and abstraction ahead of his time. It is our privilege to have with us Miss Yamini Telkar, who will lead us through this session. Ms. Telkar is a highly respected Indian art specialist with over 3 decades of experience across museums, institutions, and public art projects. She holds an MPhil in Art and Aesthetics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, a Master's in Ancient Culture from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, and a Bachelor of Fine Art from JJ School of Art, Mumbai. Her recent projects include curating the acclaimed art program for Terminal 2 at Kempegowda International Airport, Bengaluru. She continues to hold consult widely for art galleries, museums, and cultural institutions, bringing a rare blend of scholarship and practical curatorial insight. Now, please join me in welcoming Ms. Yamini Telkar as she guides us through this rich and reflective journey into the visual universe of Rabindranath Tagore. Ma'am, good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Darshan. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And as you rightly said, today we're going to look at an artist who is a towering figure and needs no introduction. But yet, when it comes to his art, we do need something. Uh, so, thank you all for joining in. And let me begin the talk. Uh, this is the second of the talk that we're doing. The 9 national art treasures that are identified by the government of India. And I'm going to divide the talk in 3 parts. The first part dwells into what do I mean, or what does it mean when you say a national art treasure? That's one. Two, a brief introduction on Rabindranath Tagore, the context of his art. And the last part, which I always find interesting, is the reception of the artist. How were his works perceived by his contemporaries? How were the works perceived, subsequent to his passing away? That kind of gives us a very wholesome picture of the artist. We're going to talk, 40 minutes is the duration, is when I'm going to introduce, talk, and the last 40 to 45 minutes, and the last 15 minutes, I'm open for discussion, questions, conversations, and the likes. So to begin with, you know what do you mean by national art treasures? It is something that has been constituted in our country in the year 1976. There were 4 artists who were designated as the national art treasures: Rabindranath Tagore, Jamini Roy, Amrita Shergill, and Nandalal Bose. The second lot, immediately in 3 years, there were 5 more names that were added into that list, which is Raja Ravi Verma, Gaganendranath Tagore, Abindranath Tagore, Nicholas Roerich, and Silos Mukherjee. Now, what does it mean, or what was the need for it? To give a little background, the idea of having a national art treasure is not something new. Countries across the globe have it. For instance, Japan also has this concept. It is called, the national treasure, and it includes, interestingly, architecture, styles of architecture, crafts, and living person. Just to point out, the list of artists, the nine artists that have called out or which are recognized as national art treasures, by the time that was done, they were all, they had all passed away. But in Japan, it was something that was done for a living person. France has it, it's called the master artist. England has it. There are many countries across the globe who do that some sort or the other. But the way that we are doing it in our country is something that's unique. Which, and interestingly, here's another twist to the story. The national art treasures, which is what we identify as modern art form artists, was under came under the ruling of the Archaeological Survey of India under the Antiquities and Art Treasures Act of 1972. This act is important because it was largely, to control and to contain the antiquities of the country, to prevent them from being exported and shipped out, and so that our treasures are not lost. So that one part is clear. And antiquities is also something, there's one other ruling over there which says that anything that is 100 years old is defined as an antiquity. But what we have over here, these artists at that point in 1976 had not yet attained that status of 100 years. So, you know, when we look at it today from this perspective, there's always this questioning: what inspired the government to do something like that? Now, here's my conjecture to the whole story. I call it's a mystery. I call it a mystery because who identified the artist? I'm not questioning the choice of the artists. They're all fantastic names. They're all artists who've done phenomenal work. But who did this in the government? Who came up with this list saying that, okay, these are the people that you need to qualify as a national artist? Because when I did my research, and I've been doing it sporadically for some time now, I never came across anything. There wasn't a bill or act or any information that was available. In fact, I've asked a friend who's a lawyer also, saying that why don't you look at this and try and figure out something. So there are two more people now trying to look at it. So if anybody in the audience today has any information, happy to hear, happy to know that. But I have kind of thrown out two names which I think are possible contenders for drawing up this list. One is Pupul Jaikar. Pupul Jaikar was somebody who was an advisor to the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and Pupul Jaikar was a master, a scholar, extremely keyed into the art and culture of the country. So, but her name doesn't feature in the people who recommended or kind of suggested it. She's a possibility. The other person is Lakshmi Prasad Sihare, who was the director, who served as the director for the National Museum, then for the National Gallery of Modern Art, but nothing to do with the Archaeological Survey of India. But he was also an advisor to the Prime Minister. So, based on my research, on my, kind of trying to figure out, these are the contenders, but there's nothing official which is available. And the third thing which kind of always intrigues me is that why after 1975 no other artists were put up into that list? Why did it stop only for these two lists and only for that? Because it's not to say that you don't have other artists who qualify for that, who did phenomenal work, who are masters, or who did path breaking work. There are many names like that, but it just stopped. So the mystery kind of holds over there. But my questioning apart, I think what is important to note is that the country recognized, these names and said, like, here are the masters, these are the people that have made the country proud through the way that they did their art. And the National Gallery of Modern Art has a phenomenal collection of all the nine artists, amongst the other things also that they have. And so it becomes that much more interesting to engage, in these artists through the lens of national art treasures. Also, the other thing is that for the longest time, like right up to 2000 or 2000, around that time, 2005 on, till that time, this group was not publicly or widely known, even in the art circle. It was only when a gallery did an exhibition, called it the National Art Treasures, recognized it, put it out there, that everybody started taking note, recognizing it, and doing it. Of course, the National Gallery of Modern Art always had it, always listed it as that. But, you know, in the larger audience, like art students or even art lovers or people who went into galleries, it was not common knowledge. Again, it becomes that much more important for us even today to look at these artists, understand what they contributed, in the larger scheme of things, in the history of art history of India. So with that context, with that background, it's always important to have that somewhere in the back of your mind. And we now actually start looking at what is it that that's so special about the works of Rabindranath Tagore. Uh, some timelines to put a context as to when he was born. It was 1861. He passed away in the year 1941. A long life, and he'd seen changes, in the country as they were evolving. He saw two world wars. He saw the struggle for independence, and the change that was taking place in society. I'm not going to go too much into his personal life and where he began, because I think that will take up too much time, and also that this information is available. I'm going to focus largely on milestones or his art, or his the points of inflection where art comes into play. I begin with the Nobel Prize. Why is the Nobel Prize important? It is important because, one, it recognizes, his creation, his creativity, not only within India but across the globe. Because he becomes the first non-European artist or non-European person to be awarded a Nobel Prize, and that kind of opens up a lot of doors for him. And he starts, traveling, meeting people, interacting, and that changes his perspective a whole lot as he goes along, because as you travel, as you meet people, the newer thoughts that come into you, into your mind, and how you connect and how you evolve. And especially somebody who's a genius and who's as sensitive as Rabindranath Tagore, it just goes to say that how he kind of opened up the entire canvas of his life, which you see. Then you look at the next step that kind of comes in, is I've highlighted that in 1921 he formed the Vishwa Bharati University at Shantiniketan. Shantiniketan was formed by him in the year 1901, which was the school Gurukul, learning in the open, going back to the traditional way of learning. But he incorporates Vishwabharati University with a special emphasis on art education in the year 1929, post 1913, post his travels across the globe, especially in Japan and in Europe. These are two contrasting, journeys that he's had. And then in 1924, it's kind of officially recorded that he started painting. But it's not like, an alarm clock that went off and he said, okay, I'm going to do painting, or it was his birthday and he started painting. The desire to paint, or his interest to paint, was there throughout his life, because when he was in school, he did learn painting. He was trained in art, uh, especially the European academic way, but he never pursued it with earnestness. And he kind of dabbled in it possibly, but it's not known. So by and large, 1924 is accepted date, saying that this is when he began painting or creating in earnestness or with a great focus. But I'm sure that this journey would have kind of been building up, you know over a period of time. Because what we also have to remember is that Rabindranath Tagore, in his family home, had two artists, his nephews, Abanendranath and Gaganendranath, who were painters, professional painters, cartoonists, caricaturists, which were there. There was Nandalal Bose, who would be in his home, who he had interactions with. He had JP Ganguly, immense artists kind of coming in and going out of his house. And so it's not, I mean, art was not something that was unfamiliar with him. In fact, he was quite aware of the role of art and what was happening and what were his nephews doing. And he kind of it is said that he started painting post his travels. And once he started, he was kind of at it incessantly, kind of working with ink and pen. And it kind of evolves quite rapidly, not only because of the number of works. It is said that if he started painting in 1924, by 1930, when he had his first exhibition, he had a body of work that went over 2,000 works. So that is the kind of focus and intensity that he had, for his work that he did as a studio practice. And I'll just take you through a few of his works, which are there in the collection of, the National Gallery of Modern Art. Perhaps, some of the best works are in the National Gallery of Modern Art. And it is also interesting that one of the first collections to be part of, the early collections to be part of the National Gallery of Modern Art, was also Rabindranath Tagore along with Amrita Shergil. So, the text I'll come back to, don't worry about that, but just look at the imagery, because I'm trying to make a point over here. uh, i I personally love this work. I think it's phenomenal. Or even this one, or this one. Now let's come back again, just to kind of regroup. What you see over here is works that are so challenging, that are so different. They're not dated, unfortunately. I mean, especially for an historian or somebody who looks at art critically, you always try to look for that signature, look for the date, because you're trying to place them in a sequencing, that, oh, which came first, what was the middle, what would have been the end. Rabindranath Tagore doesn't give us any clues of that sort. And I think that kind of is summed up over here also. This statement particularly that I've put over here is, is the mantra to understand what Rabindranath Tagore wanted to do through his works, and how did he want us as the audience to look at the works. I'm just going to read out to kind of emphasize the point and make it clear. People often ask me about the meaning of my pictures. I remain silent even as they are. It is for them to express and not to explain. I mean, what a beautiful statement. Why is this important? Because, it tells us, it helps us understand that as an artist, he wants his pictures to speak, and that's what every artist wants to do, right? That's not something new. But can you imagine that for a creative person, for an artist, who for the first I mean, for his life, at 63, at least you can imagine. Let's say he started writing when he was 10 or whatever, or 20. Say over 5 decades, words were his tool. Words were his medium of expression. He used words to kind of take us to a journey that moved us from this realm. And here he's telling us that I will not speak, I will not explain. It is not about explanations, it is not about description, but it is expression. And it is expression that he wants in his works. It would have been very easy for him to, write beautiful notes, to write essays and pages and, go on about it. But for him to have that control and say, there's another quote where he says that, art is where, your pictures or forms take over where words stop. They take you beyond that. And I think that is something that is so powerful, to not kind of use one to explain the other, and to be able to distance them so clearly and say, what words do is not what my art can do. And if any of you or all those of who you are artists might resonate with this so clearly, because so many times till this date there's this question that comes up: can you please explain what is the work? Can you please tell me, or what is it that you're trying, what is the story behind it? And for me, who's not an active painter, but I try to understand what the artist is saying. If I have a note of that, I kind of contextualize it and bring the entire story. But for him, people would have pressurized him over and over again, saying that you're a poet, you write, words is your thing. Why aren't you talking about it? And he remained silent and he did not cave in, because he understood that his art, or what he was trying to do, is something that is so distinct from the power of words. And for me, that was it. That kind of made the pictures even more powerful. And now let's go back and look at the works. And what did he do? Where did he start? Now, just to give you kind of a, very clinical, linear kind of description, he began by doodles. Everybody knows that, there were pieces of paper. When he was going through his text, he started doodling. He started making these little sketches of what he wanted to erase, and that slowly kind of takes over, and they become forms. Um, they became forms, or they became an evolution of what the doodles were doing. So doodles comes as his, let's say, the primary instance of his engaging with art in a very formal, in a conscious manner. The next body of works that we have is portraits. These very few are portraits that are identifiable, or he doesn't name them, but they're all about the expression. They're powerful. Some of them are like, you wonder, is this person happy? Is this person kind of smirking? What is going on in their head? So he captures that emotion. There are lots of portraits that he did. Then there's another body of works which is even more interesting. Even more interesting for me. They're all equally fascinating, which is, what you call as animal-like figures, because they're not necessarily your identifiable horse, deer, cow, dog, but they look animal-like, and they kind of you know go into different forms. They become a whole kind of part of the entire thing. And then he did very few landscapes also, which are there, which again had this very quirky kind of feel. And if you notice, he always, they're monochromatic. Even if they are color, the colors are quite subdued. There's a thing of where he's not concerned about, if you notice, if you look at these pictures, it's not about skill. It's not about finishing it correctly. It's not making it pretty, but it's about expression. So what you can associate what Rabindranath Tagore is doing, that for him the focus is all about expression. How do I express what is there to express? And he says that I I'm paraphrasing. I'm not giving you it verbatim. What he says is that for me, when I paint, when I create, my mind has stopped working. It's not like that I plan, it's not like that I make a sketch and then I make it into a larger work. I Probably he kind of wants to say that he goes into a space, a zone where there is no logical mind, but the hand takes over, and he kind of starts making them, and they kind of take a life of their own and they get evolved. And he's also said something very interesting. He says, the moment somebody comes and tells me, oh, this is such a beautiful picture, I start on it again, because I don't want it to be beautiful. I want it to communicate something more than beauty. And he goes back to it. He says, I destroy it, I kind of distort it, fragment it, and build it again till the point it comes where it's met the expression. And that's what he's trying to do through all his works. He's expressing something that is so deep within him, which only a form, a color, a composition can kind of make for him, and nothing to do with words. Which brings me to a point where where I would like to highlight that he doesn't title the works. None of the works that he did are titled by him. For instance, this one, it says a wheeled woman. And that is a descriptor that is given to this work. It's a woman, and she has a wheel on it. But it's not a title that Rabindranath Tagore consciously gave to his works. He did not do that. He did not date it. He did not sign it. He did not title it, because he wanted them to be as pure, as direct as his expressions, and he wanted us, the viewers, to engage with the work and you know be involved with the process that was there. That's why the brush strokes that you see, they all kind of add to that one story that he's trying to create. So the last thing that I said that he did, the kind of subjects which are there is doodles. You have portraits. You have animal figures, and then you have the landscape. He also did a few self portraits which were there. You know, Again, as art historians or somebody who look at art, we always try to contextualize it, right? Saying that what are the influences, where did he kind of learn, or where did he get his inspiration. I mean, inspiration is not something that's important, but more in terms of contextualizing. While Rabindranath Tagore, you know, didn't have formal art education, I did mention that he was exposed and he was trained in the art of using watercolors and inks. So familiarity with the material was there. Familiarity with what was the then kind of art movement that was happening is there, which was the Bengal revivalist group, which was there in his own house. You had Rabindranath Tagore, who was leading it. There was E.B. Howell, who was kind of driving this whole art form, which was to do with nationalism. This is something that we will do when we talk about Rabindranath Tagore and his work. But Rabindranath Tagore was, he was his own person. He didn't believe that if you have to be Indian, or if you had to be identified as an artist from India, you had to look and mimic the works from the past. What does he mean by that? What he's saying is that you don't have to copy the miniature paintings. You don't have to, revive those subjects. You don't have to revive some. You don't have to revive the past. You don't have to bring it back again in a literal sense. He said, look at the past in a very different manner. He said, like, look at Ajanta, but not to make copies, but understand what the artist is trying to do over there. He said, look at the Kalighat pots. Look at the way the folk artists are painting, which is they paint what is around them. The way they paint is with abandon. And that is something that he really liked. And he, in fact, wrote a letter to his daughter-in-law telling them, I wish Abanindranath Tagore moves out from what he's doing and looks at the world around him. And that's what he wanted to do. And that is what you see, in a painting like this, which is, again, this is this animal like form, is what I would say. where it is so sparse, where the control of line is so strong. They're bold, and he doesn't go into more detailing than that is required. He picks up these elements from what we know as the Kalighat parts, or what you call as the the Chitrakars of Bengal, which he would have seen living over there. He picks up all these, I wouldn't say influences or styles, but he imbibes the spirit of that, which is simplicity of form. That is something that comes repeatedly in almost all his works. Yeah, it's very simple. So, if I were to kind of, you know, uh, condense it and describe his style, I would say this is his landscape. There are three qualities which which describe Rabindranath Tagore's works the best. One is childlike simplicity. He doesn't go into unnecessary details. He doesn't overload them with, stylistic tendencies or influences. His pictures are what would you would say unpredictable, because look at all of them. Look at the landscape. Look at this. This is, I've kept the doodle at the last. This is the doodle which is there. There's a reason why I'm doing that. Or this one, or this one, or this one. They're all also diverse, also again unexpected. If you're flipping a book and you look at his works, it's like, oh my god, this one's so different. There's something so unpredictable. You cannot predict what he's going to do, because he is unfettered by isms, by training, and he's just true to his own thoughts, his need for expression. And what there's also at the same time, they're like, he doesn't want to paint the world that is around you. He doesn't want to paint the world in a beautiful manner. It's a dream, it's a hope, it's something that's beyond what we experience, and he wants to take you to that other world which is there. This is as far as style is concerned. Well, then a few things that I think I should highlight over here is that uh, the first times his work were exhibited were in 1930. It was in Paris, and uh, interestingly, when it was exhibited in Paris, it was exhibited in a museum, and what was shown along with that his exhibition at that time was art from Africa. So basically it was kind of saying that but Rabindranath Tagore's were paintings that were done now. So it was saying that look at the geniuses which are there from the East, from the Orient. And mind you, because it's 1930, and the way the Orient or East was perceived was completely different. And so he comes in as a modern artist, along with artists like Kandinsky and Paul Klee, or your expressionist painter from Germany, which he would have seen. And another interesting fact, Rabindranath Tagore was instrumental in bringing the German Bauhaus group to Calcutta in the year 1934. I'm not sure with the year right now, but it was in the 1930s, so that artists and people in India can know what was happening in the West. So he was that aware and that kind of clued into what was happening, and he had access to the world around him in that manner. Which brings me to the third point, which is, how was his art accepted by the people? Unfortunately, uh, even in the West, everybody who knew him through his works. They saw him as a spiritual, person, somebody who was like a very mysterious mystic. And when they would see his works, which were like for instance, for this landscape or something like this, they couldn't relate to it. They couldn't relate Rabindranath Tagore, the poet, the writer, who created such beautiful stories and ideas and visuals in their mind, to be creating something which defied everything that was around them, that they saw as soothing or peaceful or calming. This disturbed them, and they didn't know how to deal with it. The only place where he got a very positive and supportive response was in Paris. The first time that he exhibited was in New York, because again Kumaraswamy was there, and he explained what the context of Rabindranath Tagore's art is. Because people had a tendency to say that, okay, if he's writing Gitanjali, if he's writing beautiful poems, we want beautiful pictures, but this is not what they got. Forget the pictures, but he's not even talking about the paintings, and we are supposed to make sense out of it. How does that work? When his pictures were shown in England, again the same confusion. And that happened exhibition after exhibition in Europe. Once he came back to India, again, no surprises there. In Calcutta, it was shown largely in Calcutta. In 1932, there was the first exhibition of his works in the Calcutta College of Arts and Craft. Apart from Nandalal Bose, O.C. Ganguly, a few writers, none of the audiences or the students understood his works, because they couldn't find an explanation, they couldn't find a correlation. They wanted words, and he refused to give them words. He kind of drew into a shell, and he said, and how do we know this today? Because he's actually written a letter to his friend in England, the sculptor William Rothenstein, saying that they don't understand my they don't understand my art. um, Maybe I'm addressing the wrong audience. uh, I don't know. Maybe I'm not an artist who who is who is able to connect with the audiences. And then he writes this statement saying that I am not somebody who can plan and who can use skill to make art. My art comes out of spontaneity. My art comes from a place of wanting to express. And it is not like my poetry. I am not creating windows to the world, but I'm making you aware, and I want to nudge you and take you forward to do something that is different. This is while he was alive, and he kind of then stopped showing his work, but he continued to paint. He did not stop. His writing kind of became lesser and lesser, and art kind of takes precedence, and he creates a lot of works with that. After his passing away, I think there were enough people who understood the value or the importance and the significance of his art, because he becomes, or he is, the first artist to kind of talk about modernism or modernity in his works. And he truly kind of you know shook the art world around. And what he did bring was, what he did create was, in Shantiniketan, the space for artists to express, to create works which were very different from what was happening around the country. uh, and he becomes kind of this silent supporter, and he allows Nandalal Bose to experiment, and the whole school of artists, like Nandalal Bose becomes a teacher there. His style goes under a lot of change. There's Ram Kinkar Bej, who's also part of Shantiniketan. There is KG Subramaniam, who's part of the school. The number of artists that Shantiniketan kind of created, or came about, was because of Rabindranath Tagore's vision and his kind of bringing in Nandalal Bose to do something that was very different. So his contribution as an artist did not remain restricted to his own work, but he helped build generations of artists. That we as a nation are proud to say are artists who created some phenomenal work. And then, apart from that, I'm just we 40 minutes. I'll just take another 5 minutes here to kind of run this up to his contribution as an artist. He also understood that art had to be inculcated in children from a very young age. So the primer that the school kids would have, for learning the alphabet or simple vocabulary and poems. He did woodcut prints for that. He encouraged Nandalal Bose and the students to do things like that, and they're known as Sahaj Path. And you can go online and do Rabindranath Tagore Sahaj Path. And there's such, I cannot read Bengali, but the images and the illustrations which are there are so beautiful, so simple. I think this is something that should be incorporated by the education system. They're relevant even today. That's how forward thinking he was, and how well how well he understood that that children need to be educated right from the word go, and they can understand and accept art, and how that evolves you as a person, is something that's quite critical. And also, you know since his passing away, I think as a country, the government has always done something phenomenal for him in terms of remembering him. Putting together exhibitions not only for his poetry but also for his artwork. And for his first, the centenary celebration, the government of India commissioned a printing press in England, specifically in London, which is called the Ganymede, to do a set of 40 prints, which was made into a booklet and distributed, of course, to various dignitaries and across the country. And when these prints were shown in a Commonwealth exhibition in London and in Paris, the quality of the prints was so good that people who didn't know that they were prints thought they were original works. And a set of those prints is available in the Victoria and Albert Museum's collection. So that's the contribution of the government of India in making Rabindranath Tagore's works popular and remain in people's memory periodically. Then, for the 125 years celebration, there was another exhibition that was mounted, and there was a publication, a 4-volume publication that was prepared uh, for that particular for that particular celebration, which is perhaps the most well researched document, which is written by R. Shiv Kumar, and it has reproductions of his works. It has beautiful essays which captures the essence of Rabindranath Tagore's contribution. So while during his lifetime he may not have received the kind of acclaim or the kind of applause or recognition for his art, in his passing away, he's always remembered, always recognized, and his contribution is remembered till date. One is when he was, when his works were there in the collection of the National Gallery of Modern Art. Two, when the government kind of issued or commissioned a book on his paintings. The third is that the continuous support which comes in forms of exhibitions, publications for his art, which is there. And I think that says a lot, because it's very rare to have a creative genius who's not only, I mean, he's a genius, so obviously he can do it, but over here it is poetry and the visual form, and creating something that is so distinct and so unique to both, and both of them don't kind of overlap one another but are distinct in their own identity and and character. uh, Also, sorry, I get talking and my slide kind of lags behind, but these are the kind of works which are, which are there. And I think he as an artist is somebody that we can enjoy even today. You don't feel that these works are almost 100 years old. They are relevant today. They connect with us today. They make us think. They make us pause. And I think that is the test of time. And Rabindranath Tagore's work really, resonate and help us. You know I don't know, be better people, but help us find ourselves, find our emotions, or stories that we want to kind of look at. With this, I complete my um, you know presentation on Rabindranath Tagore, his works, what it means, how you perceive them, and how do you contextualize them in the times that he lived in, and also in context to his poetry. So, if there are any comments, questions, happy to have a conversation on that. Thank you very much.
So we don't have any questions as of now, ma'am.
Okay,
So should we wait for a minute or should we call it a day?
let's wait for a minute. Maybe somebody is kind of thinking, or whatever.
So, can you please show some light on his doodling? I mean, we all know he started late in
Yeah,
70s too.
yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of his doodlings are quite famous. So,
Yes, absolutely. So basically, the doodles kind of this, particularly this one, this is still a fully evolved kind of a doodle which was there. Uh, these began as his excess, as notations, as doodles. But when they evolved, I think there is another, he's quite conscious of what he did afterwards. He says that these kind of go back to my childhood, and again he has this narration where he says that I remember the winter mornings in my home when I would sit out, when I was on my bed, and I would see these shadows that were cast off the trees from the courtyard or from the veranda, onto the white wall in the gentle sun. And this is the description is so beautiful of what he remembers. You can actually imagine a young kid of about 10 lying down, looking at a white wall, the sun kind of coming through, which is not strong, and creating these moving shapes and shadows. And he says that memory is very strong in my head. And the other thing that the doodles are kind of connected to is that when he was in Europe, he'd seen the concept of automatic, and how an automatic is meant to kind of give you freedom to express your innermost thoughts that you can't communicate verbally or directly, and how children were trained in Europe at that time to kind of express themselves through these automatic drawings. And he had seen and imbibed these, and that's how he continued to do the doodles. And he took them seriously because he knew that it was allowing him a moment to express something that was very deep and painful inside him to find a voice. Yes, sorry, there's a question. I've
there is no
learned,
question, ma'am. Yeah.
yeah. I've learned from various sources that Victoria Ocamp had supported showcasing his works when he was alive. Yes, so in one of here in this,
Continues to ask.
yeah. So here in 1930, Victoria Ocamp, his friend from Argentina, helped him. She was instrumental in putting his show in Paris, and that too at a very quick breakneck speed which was there, because when he traveled to Argentina, he traveled with about they say about 400 of his sketches, and she saw them and she realized that these are not like we kind of would say, oh, they're just doodles. But she realized the value, inherent value of his works, and that they were path breaking and they had to be showcased through the work. So she spoke to her friend who was the director of the museum, and she organized it, so back framing them, transporting them, curating them, and it was there. So he did receive appreciation in Paris. It was well appreciated, but when it went to England, not so much. In New York, again, his works were well received because Ananda Kumaraswamy was there, and Ananda Kumaraswamy wrote articles. He kind of built the ground for him. So in Paris and in New York, Rabindranath Tagore's works were well received. But in London, in Germany, not so much. In India, also, it was very lukewarm. That's what I was trying to say, that not everybody understood and kind of embraced him and said, celebrated him. Like, for instance, when in the first lecture, when we spoke about Raja Ravi Verma during his lifetime enjoyed success. He was recognized. He had commissions lined up. Of course, there's a different way of painting or operating that he had, but people appreciated his work. In fact, Rabindranath Tagore has also appreciated, Raja Ravi Verma's contribution, not all of his art. So he said that, oh, Raja Ravi Verma helped us connect or think about Indian subjects and Indian stories, because otherwise, still, then everybody in their homes had European prints, but now they were replaced by Raja Ravi Verma's print. So he has helped us see Indian art or Indian concept in a different way. So the kind of success that Raja Ravi Verma enjoyed is not what Rabindranath Tagore enjoyed for his art. People didn't understand it, is what I'm trying to say. So yes, I mean, in sports and things, it was there. Does that answer your comment and question?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
so so thank you, Sangeeta ma'am, for the question. So should we wait, ma'am, or
No, I
shall we
think they're
call it?
done. If there anything, they'll, I mean, reach out to you and ask the questions, which you can pass it on to me. That's fine.
I think
Thank you so much.
so. We shall call it a day, ma'am. So
Yeah,
with this,
super.
we
Thank you.
end the
So see,
presentation.
yeah. Do you want to say
So
that the next lecture is next month so that they're prepared for it?
yeah, we have the next session, which will be scheduled in the last week of July, ma'am. So I
Yes,
think it's the time for Abanindranath Tagore.
that's right.
I'm not wrong. Yeah. So we all require. I mean, on behalf of MAM and National Gallery of Modern Art, we request one and all to join us next month. We'll be announcing the date with the invitation on the social media pages. So kindly follow us on social media pages, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube to check out the previous videos. Which is recorded and posted there. And finally, ma'am, I would like to thank on behalf of National Gallery of Modern Art Bengaluru, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, for this wonderful insight on the reflection of his life, legacy, his involvement, and the collection which is there at the National Gallery of Modern Art, which enriches our art historical journey and the history, which opens the window to look back and look forward with such kind of legends. So thank you once again, ma'am. Have a good evening. Bye. See you.
Thank you. Thank you, Darshan. Thank you, NGMA. Bye.
Bye.